As you might have noticed, the war isn't going well for Putin. Having just abandoned Kherson, the Russian army recently suffered significant losses.
I think they're now at 90k losses officially, right?
Donbass, and their logistics operation in the south is under serious strain. In reaction to the Russian army...
I saw a thing today, though, on my #1 news source, 9gag, that the Russians have massively fortified the positions now, man. It's going to be very hard for the Ukrainians to break that, man. They should, like, go around the marginal, like, actually try to go from another side or something.
Russian nationalists have once again started calling for escalation. And in the past week or so...
Can you believe that? There's a massive war, people are dying left and right, and Russian citizens are screaming for more escalation. Isn't that insane? It's like they're f***ing Goebbels asking for total war, bro.
There have even been rumors that Putin is about to declare a general mobilization. So in this video, we're going to
when are these Russians going to finally rise up, man?
Try and figure out whether Putin might actually go all out. In the last week or so, certain Russian nationalist Telegram channels have claimed that general mobilization...
Russian nationalist Telegram channels. You know, back in the day, man, I love democracy. I love free speech. And back in the day when Twitter and Instagram and everything came, I was like, yeah, that's a good thing for democracy. But now, all these years later, I think the worst thing that ever happened to democracy and free speech is social media, man. I mean, just spend one day on Twitter and you're gonna want to kill yourself, man.
With about 70,000 subscribers, reported that general mobilization would begin in January, citing comments by a
Ukrainian leader lies and tries to pull NATO into war. Right now, you on a Twitch channel. Almost 1k viewers. This is your... don't say ban. Shut up. Shut up for saying. This is your big moment. Moving target. Could you please elaborate about what the Ukrainian leadership is lying and why they're trying to pull NATO into their defensive war? Could you please elaborate? I would like to listen to you. I'm listening.
The Defense Committee, who implied earlier this month that a general mobilization would be required if Ukrainians continue...
This is kind of true. Okay, Muri Kumish, maybe also you can elaborate. Muri Kumish now and Moving Target could maybe elaborate more about all these lies of, for example, they found 4 news sites in Kherson with UN officials of human, what's it called? Crimes against humanity. I mean, the digging sites, all these people getting raped and tortured, an attack war against your country. I mean, where are they lying so much that they need help? And can you please elaborate where they lie? Are they lying about these rockets hitting civilians, flying right next into playgrounds? Is that Zelensky shooting rockets at himself so he can pull NATO into war? Please elaborate. Let's hope they have something for us.
The same day, an independent Russian outlet.
Sure, Zelensky going hard on rocket in Poland is Russian, even though it was Ukrainian rockets. Even after it was cleared, it were Ukrainian. Wait till 6 days ago. Polish president says missile that hit village was probably old S-300 rocket. Poland's president, blah, 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 blah. The missile that caused an explosion in Polish village near the Ukrainian border was probably a S-300, the Polish president said. From the information that we in RS have, it was an S-300 rocket made in the Soviet Union. Made in the Soviet Union, not in Ukraine. An old rocket, and there's no evidence that it was launched by the Russian side, and it's highly probable that was fired by Ukrainian anti-aircraft defense, which once again will indicate that, first of all, it's automated, and secondly, that the rocket will never leave the launcher if you wouldn't shoot rockets into civilian Western Ukraine. Wouldn't you agree with that? But I'm listening to you. I'm still listening. What else is he lying about?
Russian state
Can you tell us?
Agencies were continuing to prepare for another round of mobilization, despite the fact that on October 31st, Putin announced that his partial mobilization was complete. Now,
Moving target, can you name 2 more lies? So I really can see how big of a liar Zelensky is. I really want to learn from you.
Mobilization came all the way back in early March, when the State Duma passed a law mandating men of fighting age to appear at a military commissioner's office without receiving a conscription notice from regional authorities. There was similar speculation in May before Putin's victory parade speech. And at the end, you can make up your mind
just do video
and tell
games
us in the comments which you think the most likely outcome.
Yeah.
So, let's start with
Whose fault is that? It's my fault. It's my fault.
Might go for it. They are.
I thought
the
you
Russian
guys.
army doesn't currently have enough.
I'm like the biological teacher that wants to go into sex ed. Even you guys are like first grade. You know that's just not good. Although I'm complying, agree with you. Zelensky was pushing hard about that rocket being Russian. Well, welcome to war, man. If you wouldn't shoot rockets into civilian areas, then you wouldn't have to even do this shit.
Personnel. The Russian army doesn't currently have enough equipment.
Every streamer gets a chat he deserves.
These Russian nationalists. Let's start with the first one. personnel. Despite the recent partial mobilization, which was supposed to recruit another 300,000 troops to the estimated 1.7 million who were already in Ukraine, the Russian army is still being overpowered on the battlefield, and the Russian army is looking truly exhausted. As well as abandoning Kherson earlier this month, they're also struggling in Donbass, and it looks like Russian forces have just suffered a serious defeat around Bakhmut, which is still under Ukrainian control. A well-executed general mobilization and a whole load
Talk
of
to him in
troops
Discord.
might just help to rejuvenate the Russian army.
I will
and
talk to Moving
at
Talk in
least
Discord
give
if he wants
its
to,
troops
100%.
time to rest
Just tell me.
and recuperate. The second reason, though,
Thank you, Rich.
is equipment. Because as things stand, it looks like the Russian army is running low on hardware. There have been widespread reports
It's all
of
in the
new
hands of
Russian
Ukrainian
conscripts
farmers.
having to use
Nah, I'm good at
antiquated
making
or
food.
improper equipment, and some conscripts have apparently actually had to buy their own armor online. General mobilization,
Pay to win.
which will probably involve telling Russian
Get some
manufacturers to
skins.
stop making whatever they're currently making, and instead make
Some Ukrainians
Russian
actually have skins on their
caliber
weapons, right?
missiles
Thank you,
and other
Tesca.
military hardware might go some way to solving this problem. The third and final reason, though, is that a general mobilization would appease Russian nationalists. While it might not go down too well with your average Russian, a general mobilization would at least appease the more hawkish Russian nationalists.
I mean, who is that?
arguably
Who are
pose
these
the
people? Some
greatest
village people out
threat
there?
to Putin at the moment. That's because Russian nationalists and hardliners, including
You
people
would want the fully
like
black skin?
Kadyrov and
No, in
Yevgeny
winter you should
Prigozhin,
actually have... Dude, all jokes aside, man. I sometimes like to fantasize being in war. It's just a fantasy, right? I'm not... Come on, we're just fantasizing. In winter you should paint your gun white, and then... in summer and stuff, you should like go autumnish green, dark green, brownish, right?
have been calling for an
That's what you should do.
escalation in response to Ukraine's successes in the battlefield.
Also, very
Now-
important to have a very important mistake a lot of noobs do. If you are at war and you're in a trench and you're aiming at the front line, it's important to not have the glass reflex visor, because they can reflect light and they know where you are. Very important to close it at night. Very, very important.
While Putin himself isn't under too much political pressure at the moment, polls do still
That's
find
the
that
meta.
he's by far and away the most popular Russian
They're called silvers?
politician.
I don't know that.
If the Russian army loses even more territory on the battlefield, especially around
When
Crimea,
Vikings Paris
then the
bulletproof
Russian
west.
nationalists might accuse him of being too weak and essentially chickening out of an escalation.
This guy has to
Clearly
balance his
then,
factions, man, otherwise he
declaring
loses the
a
dream
general
team.
mobilization would give Putin political cover against this sort of charge. All right, so those are the three reasons that Putin might go for a general mobilization. But here are the three
They have these
reasons why
shitty-ass old
he might
AKs, man.
not. They are the partial mobilization
Simo Hijalala was eating snow so his breath doesn't show.
didn't go all that well. He doesn't have the money to do it, and it would go down really badly with the Russian general public. Let's start with the partial mobilization. And the partial mobilization has been a failure in many respects. For starters, it hasn't really helped on the battlefield. The Ukrainians have continued to retake territory, and the Russian army is constantly backpedaling. This is partly because it's been a logistical disaster. As we mentioned a second ago, there's been widespread reports that some...
So important, man, dude. The first page on Sun Tzu Art of War has to be logistic is everything, man. Like in HOI4, you see it too, right? Logistic is everything, man. And dude, when I fantasize that the German government calls me to war, man, this fucking bitch-ass government doing my logistics, fuck, man, that scares me a bit.
undersupplied and have even had to buy their own equipment. On top of that, it's caused real upset among Russia's ethnic minorities, who were disproportionately affected.
Yeah,
As we mentioned
isn't that
in other
fucking
videos,
insane, dude?
The Kremlin mostly conscripted
Isn't that
men
insane?
from Russia's...
He conscripts poor people and minorities, so the rich kids in St. Petersburg and Moscow don't see the pain of war, because then they will really start getting problems.
minority republics, which prompted anger from
Logistics
both
will be done by
locals
DHL.
and the regional authorities. One of the region's governors even implicitly accused Moscow of violating their own rules in over-conscripting from his area. And it became such an issue that Putin even made a rare public apology for it in late September. You get the idea then. If the Russian state didn't have the logistical capacity to pull off a partial mobilization, which hasn't even helped on the battlefield and has mainly just upset regional authorities with history.
Dude, I always felt like in HOI4 terms, when they did the mobilization, they got a lot of new divisions, but they had no brown line, man. They were completely under-equipped, man, and even no war.
Separatism.
Yes, you have more divisions, but you don't have the
Who's to say that
stats.
general mobilization would go
You should
any
ask
better?
Grisha,
Add
man,
that,
to help
the
him. He will
second
do a bit
reason it
better.
might not. They just don't have any money. A general mobilization would be exceptionally costly, and while it originally fared surprisingly well, the Russian economy is struggling at the moment. Thanks in part to the falling prices of oil and gas, Russia's revenues are falling fast, which is, in turn,
comes way too late, man.
Putin's budget surplus.
I will play Comedy
just
3,
last week, Russia's economy officially entered a recession with a 4% contraction.
Yeah,
and
fucking
the
deserve
Kremlin
that shit.
apparently knows this, which is why in their latest budget, they only increased military spending by about...
And never forget, this is a old communist Russia, man. A lot of their stats are probably fake and shit. It's probably... With communism, it's always much worse than they say.
About 40%.
Officially 4%, right? But they're lying all the time anyway.
Given that the partial mobilization increased troop numbers by about 25% all on its own, this means...
You know how in Total War you have a diplomatic rating? And when it's minus 100, nobody trusts you anymore. That's what Russia has now, right? Anything they say, it means nothing anymore.
Russia
Utterly.
don't have the fiscal space for a general mobilization, and the most recent budget essentially confirms it. Which leads us on to the third and final reason. The Russian public...
That economy should have struggled months ago.
Polling does show that the Russian public still overwhelmingly support...
Look at all these young people, man. You're young. You're supposed to have an open mind and use your head, man. What is this, Twitch chat?
And their so-called special military operation, they were less enthusiastic about the partial mobilization. Not least because the political impact of the partial mobilization was mitigated by
right there in the front.
disproportionately targeted politically unimportant ethnic groups. But also because one of the things that's made Putin most popular with the Russian public is...
What a way to purge minorities, man. You just sent them to the front line, dude.
His intention to move away from mass conscription
Thank you, Doughty, man.
towards a professional contracted army. In fact, it was one of Putin's very first policies he introduced when he came to power in the early 2000s. And he's reiterated his intention to move away from conscription multiple times over the years since. In fact, in 2016, the number of contracted soldiers overtook the number of draftees for the first time. And before Ukraine,
didn't go so well, though.
The Russian army was about 2/3 contracted troops. Obviously then, a general mobilization would be unpopular in and of itself, but it would also
emptying
be
the
a
prison
direct
system.
violation of an implicit contract between Putin and the Russian people, that as long as he stays in power, he'll keep them away from the front lines. So those are the reasons on either side of the argument. These factors...
Yeah, these white kids living in St. Petersburg, oh, Grisha, they were like pro-war and shit, man. But they don't even realize what's going on. And the moment they see real conflict, real war, man, they are the first crying for their fucking mommies, man. While they sit on the internet acting like, oh, pro-Russia, pro-Russia. Fucking ridiculous, man.
From a mobilization,
ridiculous.
But they might lead him to realize that this is his only realistic shot at a victory. Ultimately, though, this is a live issue, so we're just going to have to watch and see it play out. And if that hurts your head, then you should check out Brilliant's course on...
I should check out HOI4, man. All this political shit is not good. It's not good. It's not good. What are you still doing here, mate? Jeez. Well, if you want to see more, click these videos. Have fun. Looking good, boy.